On September 30th, 2024, American Pickers star Frank Fritz passed away. Shortly after, the police garage opened the door to Frank Fritz's old garage, inside which, in addition to a collection of famous cars, was hidden a car that officially shouldn't exist. No name, no origin, no memory, just the silence of metal, and a lingering trace of something once classified, now abandoned. Whatever it was, someone had erased the trail and left only the echo of their departure. This is not just a story about $1 million car, but about a man and the secret he carried with him until the end of his life. If you thought Frank Fritz's collection was just a hobby, this video will make you think again. Frank grew up in Davenport, Iowa. He spent his childhood around junkyards and garages. That's where he first started collecting. He picked up old license plates, rusty oil cans, and anything else that caught his eye. Growing up poor taught Frank to spot treasure in trash, a skill that became his life's compass. No formal training, no fancy storefront. His class was the open road. His teachers were rusted gas pumps and peeling neon signs. Every mile taught him to read objects like history books. Unlike many TV personalities, Frank stayed simple and private. He didn't chase the spotlight or try to turn reality TV into a flashy lifestyle. What mattered to him wasn't being on screen, but being able to hold something old in his hands and figure out its story. In 2010, American Pickers aired its first episode on the History Channel. The show became an instant hit. But Frank always played the quieter role, observing more than talking. He noticed details others missed, whether it was a rare screw or the engine type of a classic car. Frank once said he wasn't in it for the money. He was searching for a connection to the past. A rusty sign or a forgotten car, they all carried stories he wanted to hear and preserve. Over time, his personal collection grew steadily. He didn't brag about it. He didn't show it off on social media. Instead, Frank quietly filled his garage with pieces he believed still mattered, even if only to him. That lifestyle made him stand out. While the rest of the world rushed to post and share everything online, Frank chose silence. His garage wasn't open to fans or the public. It was his private space, a memory vault where he could be alone with the stories he cared about. In the furthest corner of Frank's garage, tucked behind 2 stacked tool chests and a pile of dust-covered boxes, sat something no one had expected. A car. One that didn't appear in any official records. There was no paperwork, no title, no trace in any registry. It wasn't mentioned in Frank's notes. It never showed up in his media or the detailed inventory he kept of every vehicle he owned. Covered loosely by a faded gray tarp, the car sat at an angle, wedged in near the back wall as if it had been rolled there in silence. Its shape was low, its stance was wide, but the lines didn't match anything familiar. People who walked into that garage remembered the Bel Air, the Fairlane, the Fleetwood, but this one? No one had seen it before. And Frank had never said a word. It sat under an old gray tarp in the far back of the garage, surrounded by dust, like it hadn't been touched in years. It only came to light when legal representatives entered the garage to inventory his estate. At first glance, it was a Corvette. But then, the details hit like a hammer. The body was too wide. The hood is too low. The rear fenders are sharp as knives, nothing like the factory models. And then, the kicker. No VIN. No registration. Just that brass tag screaming, "Experimental use only." Even the cops froze. Because by GM's own records, only 5 Grand Sports were ever built. All accounted for. So why was Frank's 6th car sitting here, covered in dust like a dirty secret? Instead, a small brass plate had been riveted to the chassis. The words on it were faded, but still visible. Experimental use only. The discovery shocked the vintage car community and Corvette experts. Officially, only 5 1963 Corvette Grand Sports were ever made by General Motors, and all 5 are fully documented and accounted for. But the car found in Frank's garage didn't exactly match any of those known cars. It looked like a forgotten variant, or something someone had tried to keep hidden on purpose. Frank had never mentioned the car, even though he was known for keeping careful notes about every piece in his collection. Across hundreds of episodes of American Pickers, there wasn't a single frame that showed this mystery Corvette. That raised a serious question. Why would someone like Frank, who loved sharing his finds, keep this particular one to himself? No one knows the answer. And that silence turned the car into the biggest mystery of Frank Fritz's life. In 2020, Frank officially stepped away from American Pickers due to health concerns and the need for recovery after back surgery. At first, this seemed like a necessary and temporary break. However, what followed made it clear that this decision was not just a short pause for medical reasons. In fact, he started stepping back from the limelight well before the official statement. His retreat from public life was not sudden. It was a slow process that became more noticeable over time. Posts on social media became less frequent until they stopped altogether. Phone calls were no longer returned, and invitations from friends were left unanswered. Although Frank never spoke publicly about his personal decisions, those who knew him closely began to notice a real shift in his behavior. According to one of Frank's longtime friends, this withdrawal was not just emotional, but also physical. In his final years, Frank was bedridden, with one side of his body completely paralyzed. He struggled to lift his arm, and speaking became increasingly difficult. His friend described the frustration Frank felt when he couldn't express what he wanted to say, even though his mind was still sharp. He no longer appeared at events or gatherings. He withdrew from the outside world, spending most of his time in his garage, a cherished private space he had carefully organized and maintained for years. Unlike the polished collections of wealthy car enthusiasts, his garage had no special, as well as no open doors for visitors. It remained closed to the outside. Inside, old cars sat side by side, some of them covered in dust while others were partly disassembled. The shelves, the corners, and even the tools looked like parts of a memory map that belonged only to him. Even while choosing to live in isolation, Frank never stopped collecting. What changed was the way he acquired new vehicles. He no longer traveled to auctions or classic car fairs. Instead, he asked a few trusted contacts to help find and purchase cars on his behalf. In some cases, Frank made decisions based on a few photographs sent by email. These quick choices were no mistakes, but rather manifestations of his decades-honed collector's instincts and encyclopedic expertise. Several people who had the chance to assist him shared that Frank kept very detailed notes for every car he owned. He wrote down where it came from, how it was restored, and even how he felt about it. In his view, Frank might have lived longer if that inner drive had remained. This sense of emotional fatigue could explain why Frank kept collecting quietly, without interacting or explaining much to others. As Frank's health declined, he spent most of his time indoors. He had to go through long-term treatment, but his interest in collecting stayed strong. New cars continued to arrive. They would appear quietly in front of his garage without any notice or explanation. Some vehicles came with full paperwork, while others had unclear registration or no documents at all. Frank never explained where they came from, and those around him chose not to ask questions. One of the last cars delivered was the unusual 6th Corvette Grand Sport. A neighbor who happened to see it arrive once asked Frank about it. Frank gave a short reply saying, "It's older than you think." Then he pushed it inside the garage and closed the door without saying more. Some people believe he was building a secret collection focused on American automotive legends. This collection was said to include prototype cars, canceled racing vehicles, and even unfinished concept models from major automakers. Even though this theory was never proven, it gained attention among classic car fans. Frank had always shown an interest in cars that had stories but had never been in the spotlight. Another theory claimed that Frank had made contact with a retired engineer who had once worked for General Motors. This person was rumored to have kept a prototype frame from the 1960s that most people had forgotten about. Although no one could confirm it, car forums and collector groups often brought up this story. There was no solid evidence, but people found it hard to dismiss completely. In the world of classic cars, many Corvette Grand Sports became famous because they appeared in movies or at high-profile auctions. A good example is the 1963 Grand Sport that was featured in the film Fast 5. It was carefully recreated by Mongoose Motors for action scenes and became highly desirable after the movie was released. It eventually reached a value of about $100,000 thanks to its movie appearance and the popularity of the franchise. However, for Frank Fritz, that kind of recognition did not define a car's worth. He never took his Corvette out for inspection or authentication. He kept the car's story private, never sharing photos or filing documents. It appeared in no personal inventories, and no official records traced its history. While other similar vehicles were rebuilt, displayed, and celebrated as part of pop culture, Frank's Corvette remained out of sight, untouched, and unnamed. This difference was not an accident. It reflected how Frank saw the world. He believed that not everything valuable had to be shown or explained. A car did not need to be famous to matter. In Frank's eyes, value came from personal meaning, from the quiet sense that he was protecting something that others had overlooked or forgotten. Looking back, the final chapter of Frank's life seems to show that he was most at peace when he was alone with his collection. His isolation was not caused by rejection. It was a choice. He did not need applause or public approval. What he needed was the freedom to continue doing what he loved, on his own terms, without being interrupted and without being judged. Frank Fritz never spoke about the car. There were no photos, not a single line of notes. But when people opened the garage, it became immediately clear that his silence was no coincidence. A Corvette Grand Sport, shaped similarly to the 1963 version, but featuring details that did not match any officially recorded model. It had no chassis number, no registration records, and no indication that it had ever been inspected or legally driven. And on the garage wall, a yellowed sheet of paper, loosely taped and poorly preserved, read, "I left everything there." This discovery quickly became a heated topic of debate in the classic car community. No one knew the exact origin of the car, and no one had concrete evidence to explain its existence. That led to three major theories, each offering a different lens on the car itself and on Frank Fritz as a person. The first theory proposes that the Corvette found in Frank's garage was an experimental prototype secretly developed by General Motors in the early 1960s. According to veteran collectors, that was a time of fierce competition among American sports car manufacturers, especially after GM withdrew from official racing events due to pressure from federal regulations. Before 1963, some engineers at GM, especially those under Zora Arkus-Duntov, had secretly developed the Corvette Grand Sport as a way to return GM to racing by exploiting a legal loophole, producing a limited number of cars under the label of experimental prototypes. Only 5 Grand Sports were officially completed with proper documentation, but conspiracy-minded members of the classic car world believe that the real number may be higher. Some extra prototypes or unfinished units may have been made before GM canceled the project. If these units did exist, they were never assigned a VIN number, were not allowed to leave the factory, and were ordered to be destroyed internally. The Corvette in Frank's garage showed many traits that matched the original Grand Sport structure, but also featured subtle deviations: a deeper front intake, a slightly raised rear roofline, and a chassis that appeared to have been tested with multiple drivetrain configurations. The brass plate reading "Experimental Use Only" instead of a standard VIN plate further reinforced the idea that this vehicle might have been a top-secret unit in GM's internal development program. If true, this would not be just a rare car. It would be a piece of erased history, something GM would never want to acknowledge due to legal, competitive, or simply reputational reasons, as it was never meant to exist outside the factory walls. The second theory suggests that the car was not an original, but an illegal replica, rebuilt from authentic Grand Sport components or frames. In the classic car world, recreating legendary models is not unusual. But the 1963 Grand Sport presents a special case. With fewer than 6 cars officially confirmed by GM, any replica offered for sale is closely monitored. Some replicas have been confiscated or forced to carry the label replica if they lack original documentation. Given that context, some people chose to hide rather than display such cars. The Corvette in Frank's garage may have come from an underground custom shop in the 1980s or 1990s, using an original frame sourced from a wrecked car or leftover test parts. Subtle differences in its design could be the result of incomplete blueprints or intentional modifications to avoid copyright issues. Frank, as a seasoned collector, may have acquired it from someone trying to keep the past hidden through a private, undocumented transaction. The big question is, if Frank knew it was an illegal replica, why keep it? Did he believe that even a fake car could still represent a story worth preserving? Or was he protecting the reputation of its previous owner? The third theory, the most unusual one, claims that the 6th Corvette Grand Sport was a Frankenstein creation built from unrelated experimental parts that never belonged to a specific vehicle. In other words, it was not an original nor a replica. It was something in between, an identity-less machine made from leftover pieces of abandoned projects. In the vintage car industry, there are known cases of phantom builds, meaning vehicles assembled from disjointed parts, an engine from a burned race car, a chassis from a rejected prototype, and a body shell from a display unit. With enough technical skill and access to the right components, an individual or a small garage could feasibly create a Corvette that looked authentic but never truly matched any official model. Frank's car may have been one of those, made not for the road, but to experiment with an ideal configuration: lighter weight, better aerodynamics, or a different steering system. The fact that it was never completed also says something. Maybe the builder realized they had gone too far or encountered legal limitations. Or maybe it was made solely to prove that it could be done and then abandoned. So why did Frank keep it? If this theory holds, the car would be a perfect symbol of Frank's worldview. That imperfection can still hold value, as long as it contains an untold story. In an age when everything is dissected and overanalyzed, Frank chose to remain completely silent about the most significant piece in his entire collection. And that silence turned the Corvette into the ultimate expression of the life philosophy he lived by. Frank once said he did not care for showing off. In every episode of his show, he was always the quieter one, the more reserved one, who often watched more than he spoke. He did not chase media attention, nor did he need the community to validate the value of what he kept. For Frank, a car was not valuable because someone slapped $1 million label on it, but because it awakened something in him that could not be named. The Corvette in the garage was never inspected, never backed by legal document. But for that very reason, it may have been the most personal item Frank ever owned. A reflection of his belief that some values are meant to exist in silence. Not all treasures need to be seen, and not all mysteries need to be solved. Some car museums have sent invitation letters, and many collectors have expressed a desire to own and restore the vehicle. Even now, it's still sitting in the garage, like a part of his will he never opened. Maybe that's just how Frank wanted it, a story left untouched. A car that does not exist, sitting in the real world like a final message. Do not touch a memory unless you truly understand it. Frank Fritz didn't just collect cars, he collected stories. Each vehicle in his collection carried a history, from forgotten barn finds to rare prototypes. To Frank, they were not mere machines but fragments of a bygone era. The mysterious Corvette, lacking a VIN and absent from any GM records, stood as a testament to his passion, to seek out and preserve what the world had overlooked. He didn't boast or turn his garage into a showcase. Instead, he kept his treasures in quiet reverence, honoring the value of their uniqueness. Secondly, Frank's decision to keep the Corvette a secret revealed a profound philosophy. In an era where everything was shared publicly, Frank chose privacy. This teaches us that the most precious things don't always need to be displayed. They only need to be cherished within. Finally, Frank's legacy was a call to stay true to one's passion. He didn't chase trends or seek fame. He lived to preserve what was different, even when no one else understood. The Corvette Grand Sport, whether a prototype or a replica, was more than a shocking find. It was a symbol of Frank's spirit, perseverance, curiosity, and respect for the past. His message was clear: cherish what makes you unique and protect it even if the world turns away.